This is our moment in history and our time to determine what the fate of our country will be, not just for the next 4 years or 8 years, but for generations to come. I really am hopeful. I believe in you. We're going to make this happen.
According to a number of major polls, Elizabeth Warren is the frontrunner in the Democratic presidential primary, and she continues to reach out to grassroots supporters. The Massachusetts senator shared the video you just saw there on Twitter in hopes of encouraging more people to donate to her campaign ahead of the next FEC filing deadline.
According to a poll by Reuters, Warren is the only Democratic presidential candidate who has consistently increased her level of support in the last 6 months. Joining us to discuss Warren's success, what we can expect from her campaign, is a co-founder of the Progressive Change Institute and the Progressive Change Campaign Committee, the PCCC, Adam Green. Adam, thank you so much for joining us.
Great to see you, Adam.
Good to be here.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that we talk about so much on this show is about the theories of change. You've got Bernie, you've got democratic socialism, you've got Elizabeth Warren, I guess economic nationalism and progressivism fused into one. What is it the core difference that you see between the two candidates and why you are supporting Elizabeth Warren?
Well, first, I think Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders are in a class unto themselves among the field. I kind of picture them as Luke Skywalker and Princess Leia battling off, an army coming at them, both fighting for a bold, transformational, progressive candidacy, presidency. But there are some differences, and hopefully we'll be in a luxury position of having a fine-tuned debate about those differences. But one thing that I think Elizabeth Warren stands out for is she would be the only person that enters the presidency with a lifetime of hundreds of heavy hitters who are ready to use the full power of the executive branch on day one of a presidency. That means going to the Department of Justice and using the dusted over powers to break up big monopolies. Going to the Civil Rights Division, actually using the maximalist version of those power. And the reason is because she has been working with these people, the state regulators, the environmental regulators, the corporate crusaders, anti-corporate crusaders in state after state over the last decades. So I think that in terms of, her mantra is personnel is policy, and she would be ready on day one to fill the entire executive branch.
That is the most compelling thing. And it's funny because people who don't live in Washington don't understand that. They don't understand that personnel, the first 1,000 people, the appointees of a government on day one, are the most important difference. But what you're saying there is an institutionalist approach, as opposed to the one that we hear from Bernie, which is like people power and the working revolution. That's very much kind of a Trumpian message as well. Why is it that that institutional approach is better than one of a revolution? What do you think?
I wouldn't put it that way. I think that they have a similar theory of change on how to govern when it comes to pressuring Congress. They both, I think, unlike any other Democratic in recent memory, would use the power of the outside to pressure the inside. Right? They both talk about that on the campaign trail, and you can argue which one would be better at it, but that is their similar theory of the change. So you asked about differences. I do think when it comes to stocking the executive branch, using the maximalist version of power, having at her disposal a cadre of people ready to use those powers on day one, she's the only person. The only other person who might have that is Joe Biden, but it would be a completely different class.
Yeah, very different matter. No, I think that is the best argument for her. What do you make of, because one thing that we've looked at a lot too on this show is their different coalitions, right? Warren's first and strongest support was with the sort of affluent, white, highly educated liberal. Sanders had his greatest support among the multiracial working class. His campaign loves to talk about the #1 employer of their donors is Walmart, right? Walmart workers supporting Bernie. What do you make of that differing support? And do you see those coalitions sort of shifting in real time?
So I think they both have the ability to build a powerful coalition with, if they were the nominee. What we saw in the Quinnipiac poll this week is that Elizabeth Warren is second only to Joe Biden when it comes to African American voters.
She is rising.
She's rising. She is, surging when it comes to both college and non-college educated voters. So I think what we've seen with Elizabeth Warren, per your point before, is that she's the only candidate that is steadily increasing the poll. If you think about any of the top 6 candidates, really, she's the only one that has not had a flash in the pan, sugar high moment that has then come down. And I think it's because what I've seen on the campaign trail, everywhere from Iowa to Mississippi, is whether it's African American voters or independent voters, when they see her in the room, when they see her personal story of struggle growing up poor in Oklahoma, being a single mom in Texas, and then her connecting that to her big picture vision of taking on systemic corruption, having the government fight for regular people, they love her. I've seen people who just say, I just came to check out what she had to say, and now I'm committed to caucusing for her. And our hope is that the more people see her on the debate stage, the more and more her rise continues.
I mean, one thing is, when we talk about Elizabeth Warren, I've talked about this here, which is I feel like many of the Democrats are just unwilling to bring up the heritage scandal from the past. Do you think that's going to be a problem for her? Because she really hasn't had to answer for it since she became a major front runner. And a lot of the candidates seem to be treating it very gingerly, but there has to be some discussion in the campaign of, hey, Trump is going to hit this every single day. And there's a lot to work with.
Fox News is going to hit it every day.
Fox News is going to hit it every day. I mean, there's a lot to work with when it comes here. It's something that she was not truthful about for many, many, many years. As a Warren supporter, how do you reconcile yourself with that?
Okay, you had me until the non-truthful part.
Sure.
That's not fair.
Well,
yeah.
All right.
So I think like Donald Trump, this is old news and this is racist news. And it had a life of its own. Here's what I would grant. In the months preceding her candidacy in January, every article would say, Elizabeth Warren, comma, who is beleaguered by, insert that controversy.
Yeah.
And since she actually started campaigning on her ideas, that has resonated. The people who are seeing her campaign on her ideas know that that's in the background, but they're like, oh, this is what we're actually going to see against Donald Trump on the debate stage. And when she's asked about it, and she's been asked about it a couple times, but not often, by voters, she talks about it and then pivots to her worldview. And basically what she says is, ultimately, this will not be about my family. This is about your family, and here's what I'm going to do.
But I got to say, Adam, she froze up whenever she was on The Breakfast Club. And then yesterday, she was asked on the rope line by a Washington Post reporter whether her own ethics plan would bar the son of her vice president from sitting on a foreign energy company. And she basically short-circuited. She said, I don't know, I have to check the plan. I mean, this is a $10 million ad buy against corruption, and she can't commit to having the son of her vice president sit on a foreign energy company. That is not the Elizabeth Warren that we see on the campaign trail. What do you see there?
That's not the Elizabeth Warren we see on the campaign trail. What people see on the campaign trail is somebody who is an anti-corporate crusader who's talking about bull systemic change.
But then why is she coming out? Her campaign comes out and it says that actually would be allowed under her ethics plan. That just does not seem like something that could reconcile. And listen, I know that this sounds silly, but this is how campaigns work. I mean, ultimately in the general election, if she's saying that the anti-corporate corruption candidate would allow the son of her vice president to sit on a foreign energy company board, that seems very strange to me. I don't understand it.
And that's what friendly amendments in Congress are for.
Okay.
Right? She has by far the boldest ethics plan, anti-corruption plan since Watergate, by far, exponentially. So, and that's what voters hear when they hear her. You know, I was in Iowa recently, and I actually met a longtime Republican voter who voted for Nixon and Reagan and both Bushes, who again came just to check out what she had to say. And he said that he was crying when she talked about her personal story. And you know, her dad had a heart attack, forcing her mom to go into the job market. And the whole story is she saved the family home on a minimum wage salary, which is not possible anymore. And this guy's father had died when he was 10, and his mom had to go into the job market. And honestly, that's what voters are focusing on. It's like, she gets my struggle. And then their ears open up as she talks about a wealth tax or breaking up the big banks or big tech,
well, I know you have to hit the road, but I have one more quick question I wanted to get to you, which was on Medicare for All. There's been some nervousness among Sanders supporters in particular that Elizabeth Warren has seemed to be a little squishy on the specifics of Medicare for All and getting rid of private insurance. Now, on the debate stage, she has unequivocally said, I'm for Bernie's plan, I'm for getting rid of private insurance. But there was a moment that caught people's eye this week where she described Medicare for All as a framework instead of, it is a detailed bill with specifics, a 100-page bill. Is she going to come up with her own health care plan, or is she firmly committed to Sanders' version of Medicare for All?
Sanders' bill is a framework. Sanders' bill this year is not the same as the Sanders' bill last year. It's not the same as Pramila Jayapal's Medicare for All bill in the House or the Keith Ellison bill before that. They are all Medicare for All bills. They're all frameworks. And Sanders' own bill, which Elizabeth Warren supports, has a big TBD next to many things in it. It kicks it to agencies to figure out later. It's a framework. And she was asked a very specific question by a voter that is not addressed in the bill. And she said, we need to address that, but it will be addressed under Medicare for All. The key thing for Warren and Sanders supporters and everybody else to keep in mind is so many other candidates have backtracked.
Yes.
They used to say, I support Medicare for All.
Is she going to come up with her own plan?
They used to say, I support Medicare for All, and now they've said, you know what? My maximalist position is no longer Medicare for All. Her point is, we will get to Medicare for All. She is truly saying there are many ways of getting there, one of which, four of which are these bills, and she will get there.
Is she going to come up with her own specific
I think her position is she's with Bernie on this. I mean, it's fair to say that he has led this into the national discussion. Why take that away from him? Just like she has led the wealth tax and canceling student debt and things like Glass-Steagall into the national discussion.
He deserves that Sanders had a wealth tax a while back too, but yeah.
Not fully true, but you know, I think it is inarguable that Elizabeth Warren drove the wealth tax into the center of the national debate. I would ask anybody to debate the opposite proposition.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Adam, thank you,
Adam.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Glad to have you. Coming up, according to internal FBI figures published by The Washington Post, 120 Americans were arrested in 2018 for planning to engage in acts of domestic terrorism. 2 former extremists are going to share their stories of moving to denounce hate and what approaches work best to counter extremist rhetoric when Rising continues.